everyone. I'm Kostas Bekris. I'll be talking from the point of view of the Compare project and advertising again the robotmanipulation.org website and getting us a little bit into the discussion for the next session. So we have been talking about benchmarking, right? And if you're here, probably you are all persuaded that that's a good idea because it really allows us to fairly compare methods and methods that may be following highly different approaches, and it really allows us to do much more reproducible science and actually track progress over time. I'm getting typically November and December this whiplash of experiences because I typically go to Coral and then I may go to one of the conferences that Usama Khatib is organizing, like ICER and ICRR, and I see the excitement about machine learning and manipulation at Coral, and I hear some of the more senior members of the community the next month saying, all of those things have been happening, in the 90s when manipulation was hot again, and where is the progress? And it would be good to kind of be able to have this in a quantitative manner. And it really brings the community together to have kind of common goals and challenges, and figuring out, where do we need to make the progress to address some of the challenges, and hopefully pushes the community to really be solving real-world problems that are physically grounded, the challenges that we really have to be addressing in the world. But I also want to caution that there is a fear of over-benchmarking. The computer vision researchers always accuse the robotics community of not being very good with benchmarking. But there is typically, a comeback that perhaps this is happening a little bit too much in the computer vision community. On the other hand, it's a little bit simpler, probably. It's a little bit easier sometimes, at the image space. To have this quantitative evaluation given an offline data set. Our processes are much more interactive. We're talking about closed loop operations. Things change very quickly from the initial condition that you're starting your benchmark. And there is the fear that you can overfit to the benchmark, right? You maybe optimize for that setup and not consider all of the real world aspects. And sometimes if the benchmark becomes the objective, perhaps this may be also causing problems, with the innovation and thinking beyond the constraints of that benchmark. Sometimes this may be happening because the benchmark is actually a little bit simplified or idealized and really doesn't take into account all of the complexity. So we have to be careful about what do we define as a good benchmark for what we're doing. You can always game the system if you're building the benchmark and you have an agenda, right, of showing that a certain approach is what is winning. You could definitely tune the benchmark towards perhaps what are the strengths of a specific approach. And sometimes, we're talking here about modularity and benchmarking, and it is great to be able to evaluate individuals modules, but sometimes some of the big bottlenecks are actually on the integrations of these modules, and we need to be thinking of what is the right way of actually evaluating that integration and helping people that may be coming from different communities understand how to put tools together. So, if you're perhaps a PhD student, a postdoc, or a researcher, and after this discussion so far, excited, should I build my own benchmark? And many times I have thought myself, and I said to my student, your paper would be stronger if we had the benchmark there, and the student has said, the same thing. And this may be, a pitfall as well, right? Having too many benchmarks can also lead to fragmentation. We are not, in the end, able to really compare, and we don't really build a community around the common goals that I mentioned. And then again, we're introducing this bias that we are perhaps building the benchmark for the approach and not evaluating the approach given an objective benchmark. So yeah, you should be using existing benchmarks, especially if they are to the point that they really represent a certain community. I think Konstantinos has done a great job talking about, if you're building a motion planning algorithm, there are now very good benchmarks, and probably the reviewers are going to have a better time of evaluating your work and respected because it can be compared given everything else that is out there and there is an established benchmark. And it really actually saves time, right? It's better not to spend the time developing the benchmark and doing the work that you want to do if there is something out there. So the recommendation is use existing benchmarks whenever possible, especially for the components that are quite well studied. But it does make sense, right, to create a new benchmark, and I think we still have needs in the community, especially when we need to highlight a new capability that perhaps is not currently evaluated. If we have identified that there are important failure modes right now in existing benchmarks, you may be interested in the transferability between things that are evaluated in simulation versus the real world. If there is a new big task and challenge that we need to be addressing. So some of the recommendations here, if you're thinking of building a benchmark, motivate clearly why the existing ones are insufficient. You have to establish a process that provides fairness and reproducibility by others. And you have to build a community, right? Again, putting a benchmark out that you don't see a need from others to be able to also use it. You have to make their life easier. It has to be easy to share code, data, and the evaluation protocols. And the benchmarks, they must be at the right level of problem specification, right? You can make it too generic, it may be far from the applications, it may be too specific, and then the community is very small, and you cannot actually have critical mass for evaluating. So, on the robotics, on the robotmanipulation.org website, there is some infrastructure about benchmarking, and we have started this year receiving submissions that are highlighted there towards the objective of actually building such an ecosystem so that you can share, or whenever you're in need of evaluating your approach, actually using some of the benchmarks. And there is a form that you can go and submit and describe a benchmark. You can specify, what type it is, just provide a simple description and the title of the benchmark you're building, and then it's going to be available on the website together with a URL specifying, perhaps if it is focused on a specific application, and some visualization that represents your benchmark. So if you go on our website, you're going to see that there are already benchmarks that are split into objects and artifacts, about tools and test beds, and protocols. And for some of them, they're also, we maintain leaderboards in terms of the best techniques that have been developed. So for instance, physical objects and artifacts, we can find an early benchmark. I think Juxi is behind it. That came out of the Amazon picking challenge. So this is one of the older ones from 2017, but still I think quite useful. That replicates the setup, in a shelf and objects. A very interesting benchmark on digital robot judge that kind of it's able to measure manipulation performance in a digital manner using a microcontroller. There are benchmarks that may be focused on specific domains given the object, such as a household clothing setup. From Sergey Levin's, we have the functional manipulation benchmark. I've used it in my group for kind of insertion challenges. I think Adam and Burke have developed a household cloth object set, which may be useful for service robotics. NIST, that is interested in manufacturing applications, has a very quite complex, I would say, type of benchmark. You see kind of gears and belts here that are involved, and I think it can really motivate interesting development of methods for problems that can be used in manufacturing. There has been a work on sensorized objects by Minas Liarokapis, and probably one of the most popular benchmarks in the manipulation community is the YCB object set by Aaron Dollars, Sid Srinivasa, Peter Abil a few years back. And these are objects. There is also a page on datasets where you just can download objects. There are tools and test beds. Motion Benchmaker is here, part of this. Cloud Gripper is focusing on the grasping side. And then the protocols that basically instruct someone that if you're going to put the objects and then you're going to perform an evaluation, what is the recipe that you should follow to perform such task, including for things such as bimanual cloth manipulation that is now becoming quite popular with the availability as well of some of the imitation learning tools. Right, and again, as I mentioned, there are leaderboards. You can go here and see how some of these techniques for each one of these benchmarks that provide a leaderboard are actually performing, and you can go also and test as well your own solutions in these benchmarks. I want to make also a call to those of us that perhaps have some affiliation with the industry, that the industry can play a significant role here, because I think the resources on the academic side of really allowing, especially real-world evaluation of solutions may be limited, and I think that's one reason why we need the simulation as well. I'm not affiliated with this paper out of Amazon, but it is an example of an industrial scale data set on the perception side, where there are 50,000 real images from Amazon work cells. I hope that in the future there's going to be a version of this that is not just on the perception, but actually for each one of those scenes, you can actually get an example of a successful pick or a failed pick, which could also help train methods. But it would be great if from the industry we could actually get to the point that we can have perhaps some setups where people can submit solutions. I think very similar to the setup that was mentioned by Stefan earlier today of being, doing the challenge, the picking challenge, the bin picking challenge at CVPR, where you can submit your methods and then it is tested on a live robot. And perhaps if the industry helps with that to both motivate challenges that are relevant for applications, as well as a little bit with the infrastructure and a little bit more objective way of evaluating things that are submitted by researchers. And yes, this is effort that comes from the entire Compare team, which is multiple universities, and Adam is the community facilitator and has been working on this website. And now it's time for our discussion on benchmarking. I think we should benchmark, right? This is not a question. There are many other questions. But yeah, we should think how to best do it, how to make good progress towards an ecosystem for benchmarking, and perhaps what each one of us can do about it. Thanks.
Before we get into that discussion, any questions for Kostas? I will second his encouragement for you all to check out robotmanipulation.org.
Yeah. How much curation goes into these assets and things for uses like simulation? I remember trying to use the original YCB for simulation, and it was incredibly slow. The assets were optimized not for simulation in any way, as far as I could tell. The meshes were great for perception and maybe for grasping, but in terms of simulation, at least in Drake, it was just not a non-starter. We would have to go through and manually tweak everything to get it down to something that was reasonable for our use.
Yeah, I mean, we don't do that at robotmanipulation.org. We will accept the data set, but it is a question of how the community should be doing it, of actually providing the feedback to say, yeah, good job, but I cannot use it. I think that's a discussion point of how we can actually have this discussion, perhaps verifying the usefulness of a contribution is an important aspect of the benchmarking process.
I'll ask, have you made that point to any of the originators of YCB, those who are in control of the model set?
I told Dimitri a while ago, but I have not surfaced it further at this point.
We can have reviews or upvotes.
Well, I was going to say, so we have not established the upvote review kind of idea yet. We have been talking about ways that they can be rated, that they can be evaluated, how usable